There is a quiet shift that happens somewhere near the midpoint of your career. You wake up one day and realize the certainty you once operated with has begun to soften. You used to make decisions quickly. You used to trust your instincts without a second thought. Now there is a hesitation that wasn't there before. Society has a phrase for this. They call it a midlife crisis. But that diagnosis is fundamentally flawed. What you are experiencing is not a crisis of age. It is not a sudden loss of ambition. It is not a sign that something has gone wrong with you. It is the psychological misinterpretation of a natural structural shift. You are experiencing a confidence collapse, masked as a loss of direction. And the reason it feels so disorienting is not because you have declined. It is because the internal system that once produced confidence has quietly stopped functioning the way it used to. That is a very different problem, and it has a very different solution. The feeling you haven't been able to name you. Don't feel incapable. That's the part that makes this so difficult to articulate. You have more experience than you've ever had. You've solved problems that would have paralyzed an earlier version of you. You've navigated complexity, absorbed setbacks, and built something real. And yet the certainty is softer. The momentum feels different. You look at younger professionals and notice their uncomplicated forward movement. You look at your own trajectory and sense a plateau. You feel less decisive than you did a decade ago. There is a subtle reduction in recognition that you can't quite explain. And quietly, a question begins forming. Is my window closing? Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a low, persistent tension that says, if something doesn't shift soon, this feeling may become permanent. You fear becoming experienced but ignored. You fear being overtaken by people who have less depth, but more visible energy. But you are not desperate. You are not unraveling. You are deeply unsettled, and there is a significant difference. What was actually producing confidence before? In your 20s and 30s, your confidence had a particular quality. It felt natural, almost automatic. What most people don't realize is that it wasn't entirely self-generated. It was structurally supported. Early professional life contains a set of mechanisms that produce confidence almost automatically. Promotions happened on a visible track. Our learning curves were steep, which meant the rewards for competence were frequent. Peer groups advanced alongside you, creating a sense of collective momentum. Feedback was fast, and it regularly confirmed you are on the right path. This is what we can call the progress feedback loop. You acted, you saw results, you received validation, you moved forward. The cycle repeated. This is not a criticism of earlier confidence. The growth was real. The experiences were genuine. The competence was earned. But the system supporting that confidence was, in large part, external. And after 40, that system changes. What changes, and why nobody names it, clearly progress, slows. When you're early in your career, almost everything you do produces visible improvement. But as experience deepens, growth becomes more nuanced. The improvements are real. They show up in judgment calls, in what you choose not to do, in subtleties that don't register easily on performance reviews or in social recognition. Recognition redistributes. Organizations generate attention toward emerging talent. There's structural energy around those who are ascending. For those who have already ascended, who are carrying complexity, managing real stakes, holding institutional knowledge, visible recognition often contracts, even as the actual contribution grows. Responsibility increases, but external confirmation doesn't follow proportionally. The weight of financial obligations, family stability, professional reputation, all of it becomes more present. The risk calculus becomes more nuanced, and where someone younger can experiment freely, you are navigating with more at stake. Here's what quietly happens. The external systems that once confirmed your competence become less reliable as confidence sources. If your confidence architecture was built primarily on those external signals, this shift registers as loss. But nothing has been lost. The signal source has changed. The misalignment nobody talks about you have been running a midlife career on an early life confidence system. That is the actual problem. It is not a personal failure. It is a structural misalignment. The progress feedback loop that worked in your 30s is not designed to function the same way at 45. Not because you have deteriorated, but because the conditions that powered it have naturally shifted. Progress is less linear. Recognition is less frequent. The environment no longer generates the same automatic confirmation. And when confidence depends on external momentum, and that momentum plateaus, confidence begins to leak. This is why experience and hesitation can coexist. This is why you can be the most capable person in a room and still feel less certain than someone far less experienced. They are still inside the progress feedback loop. You have moved beyond it, but you haven't yet fully built what replaces it. Many people you once compared yourself to were never truly confident in a deep sense. They were carried by momentum. The momentum has now settled. The external noise has quieted. And in that quiet, the question becomes, what do you actually stand on? The realistic weight of this stage. Before answering that question, something needs to be said directly. The transition ahead is real. It is also genuinely difficult, not because people lack capability, but because it runs against a set of constraints that are entirely legitimate. Financial obligations are real. The window for high-risk experimentation narrows when others depend on your stability. Concern about professional reputation is not vanity. It reflects decades of credibility that took real effort to build. Reduced tolerance for certain kinds of failure is not fear. It is the rational calculation of someone who understands what major setbacks actually cost at this stage. These realities deserve to be named honestly, because if you've felt cautious lately, if you've hesitated where you once moved quickly, part of that is not weakness. Part of it is appropriate judgment. The question worth sitting with is whether that caution has extended beyond what's actually warranted. Whether the hesitation you feel about your own judgment, not just about external decisions, has become a pattern of its own. Caution is wisdom. Caution turned inward against your own authority is something else. What the shift actually looks like. The confidence that sustains, and in many cases deepens, after 40 is built on a different foundation. Not the feeling that you are advancing rapidly, but the knowledge that your read on a situation is calibrated by something real, by patterns recognized across years, by decisions made under actual pressure, by the accumulated texture of experience that cannot be shortened or faked. This is the internal authority loop, where the progress feedback loop required the environment to confirm your competence. The internal authority loop doesn't depend on that confirmation in the same way. It doesn't rise and fall based on whether recognition is being distributed your way this quarter. It doesn't require a result to validate the judgment. The judgment stands on its own. Experience, properly understood, does not simply accumulate as a credential. It becomes a lens, not something you display, something you see through. The patterns built across years in reading people, in understanding systems, in recognizing what problems actually are versus what they appear to be. These become operational in a way that early career speed never could be. Fewer illusions. This is underrated. On the confidence of earlier years often contained significant misreadings of organizations, of people, of how things actually work. Their absence is not the loss of energy. It is the arrival of precision, less wasted motion, better allocation of effort, sharper prioritization. These qualities don't announce themselves the way early progress did. They don't produce the same external feedback. They require a different kind of self-recognition, but they are advantages when correctly understood. Earlier confidence said, "I must be competent because things are moving forward." The confidence being described here says something different. I understand this situation because I have developed the capacity to understand it, and I do not need the situation to confirm that. This is not a subtle distinction. It represents a different relationship to your own judgment entirely. The person still inside the first model waits for results before feeling certain. They need the environment to reflect something back before they can proceed. This creates a dependency that becomes increasingly unstable as external feedback grows more complicated and less frequent. The person who has made the transition doesn't require that confirmation in the same way. They can hold their position, make their call, and allow the results to unfold, because the foundation of the confidence is not located in the results. This is what authority actually means, not the authority that comes from a title or a hierarchy, the authority that comes from trusting your own judgment, not naively, not rigidly, but with the grounded self-knowledge that can only come from having navigated real complexity over time. Midlife is not a closing chapter. It is not the moment your window shuts. It is the exact moment confidence stops, depending on permission. The decades ahead do not require the same kind of confidence the first half ran on. They require a different kind, quieter, less dependent on external confirmation, more rooted in the judgment that has been built, slowly, through actual experience, and is now available to be used with a precision that wasn't possible before. The material required to build that kind of authority is exactly what you already have. The experience is not behind you as evidence of who you were. It is present in you as the architecture of who you are now. Authority grows where validation fades.